Hey guys, it's Libby, and today I'm doing a review for the first book I read for Victober, and that is Desperate Remedies by Thomas Hardy. This is Thomas Hardy's first published novel. He did write a novel before this called The Poor Man and the Lady, which he tried to get published but no one wanted it, and he eventually destroyed the manuscript. Le sigh. And before we get much further, can I just say that I think this cover is terrible as a cover for Desperate Remedies. Who are those people? This is not the tone of the story. Let's get rid of it. Let's just look at me. This is one of Thomas Hardy's novels of ingenuity, which, if we're not going to bother being polite, means it's pulpier than the rest of his works. The focus is much more on intrigue and plot development than on really deep character insights or social criticism that you see in Hardy's later works. And now I would love to tell you what this story is about, but before I can get to that, we have to address how in the heck do you pronounce the main character's name? Oh, Thomas Hardy, you are known for giving your female characters pretty strange names, but this is a new one. I had to go out and do research, and I'm pretty sure the only reason I figured it out is because I have a degree in ancient Greek. It should not be this hard. So this name comes from the word Kythera, which is an island in Greece. And in Greek mythology, this island is associated with the goddess Aphrodite, so one of the epithets or the titles given to Aphrodite is Kytheria, which is turning Kythera into an adjective, and then you have to pull the accent back because of complicated things to do with like Greek vowels and long and short, and we're not going to get into it. So Kytheria is how you would say this in Greek, and then in English a lot of times we soften the hard C into a soft C. So the main character of this book is named Cytherea. So at the beginning of this story, we have a young woman named Cytherea, who is not the main character, but just another woman named Cytherea, and a Mr. Grey, and they are very much in love, and it seems like everything is going to work out okay, but then she disappears, and Mr. Grey is left sad and alone, and it seems like the story is going to be about them. But then we move forward a couple of decades. Mr. Grey has married a woman that he doesn't love, who is now dead. He has two children, Owen and Cytherea. Wonder how he got the idea for that name. And then he promptly dies. And as generally happens in this sort of book, he has left debts behind him, and so now his children have basically no money. Owen tries to get a job as an architect, which is what he has studied, but he can only get a temporary job at a low wage. Cytherea tries to get work as a governess or a companion, which are the sort of respectable professions that a woman in her situation could look forward to, but she can't get a job as either of those, so she has to apply to be a lady's maid, which is a more elevated rank of servant, but it's still distinctly a servant, whereas with companions and governesses, you're at least in a sort of gray area. She does get a job with a Miss Aldclyffe of Knapwater House, but before she can go assume her position, she falls in love with a nice young man named Edward Springrove. When she gets to Knapwater House, a love triangle develops, and of course, since this is Hardy, it's not simply a love triangle, but there's all sorts of spokes coming off, and it's very complicated. The plot is very exciting. There were even occasions where I audibly gasped while I was reading, which doesn't happen very often. And also, I was mainly listening to the audiobook, but sometimes I was like, you guys are reading too slow. I need to get this book into me faster, so I would go read the Project Gutenberg edition. There's a carnival going on outside my house. I didn't know if you can hear that. It goes to like midnight every night. It's great. Desperate Remedies was also quite different than the Hardy that I'm used to in that he, as the narrator, keeps back a lot of information. I thought we had like established this relationship, Thomas Hardy, where like you would tell me the truth about what's happening in your stories, but no, he hides things from you all the time. So throughout the second half, there's like these reveals and then these false reveals and different people knowing things at different times and disguises. And the whole time he's holding back the motivations. So you stay interested in the story because even as you figure out what happened and how the pieces all fit together, you don't really know why the people did what they did. It was also interesting to read this as a sort of kickoff for Thomas Hardy's style. When we start out the story, we're in London, and then we move to Budmouth, which is a fairly large town, which is weird for Thomas Hardy. He does like his rural Dorset countryside. And so at first it didn't really feel like I was reading a Thomas Hardy book. In fact, what with the becoming a servant and the romance, I was like, am I just reading Agnes Grey? But by the time we get to Knapwater House, although it is slightly more bustling than, you know, Egdon Heath, it's definitely the Wessex that I know and love from other Thomas Hardy books. We get his sort of provincial characters, and we also, there's this great description, it's so Hardy, where there's two men walking along a road in the rain and they can't see, but Hardy talks about how they can tell what kind of land they're passing because the rain hits grass differently than it hits crops. And so with grass, it's sort of like tinkling on all the little blades, and on crops with like bigger leaves, there's like a more splat sound. Now, I only gave this 4 to 5 stars. I thought it was good but not great. I thought the main character, Cytherea, was fairly dull. It seems like it takes male Victorian authors a couple of goes round the block to sort of figure out how to portray interesting female characters. So Cytherea was a warm-up to more interesting people like Bathsheba or Mrs. Yeobright. And now the last thing that I want to say is a spoiler, so if you have not read the book, thank you for watching. Go on your merry way, protect your ears, because the next thing I'm going to say will reveal some plot. Okay, now that it's just you and me, fellow finishers of Desperate Remedies, I mentioned at the beginning that Cytherea is a name for the goddess Aphrodite. In case you didn't know, in classical mythology, Aeneas is the son of Aphrodite. So if you know your classical heritage, you could have guessed the twist about Aeneas being Miss Aldclyffe's son. I tried to look for other similarities between the Aeneas of the Trojan War story and the Aeneas of Desperate Remedies. The Aeneas of the Trojan War story is much more upstanding sort of fellow. The main thing is that they both carry people on their backs. Aeneas, his dead wife, and other Aeneas, his living father. See if you can come up with anything more interesting than that. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you later.